role? You're Director of Social Services Technology, right? Is that your?
Yeah, we don't really use titles. So
Okay.
my role is I support teams who build and maintain large-scale web-based applications.
Okay, great. So we're one of the things we're doing this week is we're interviewing Agile leaders from state government.
Yep.
But we're interested in hearing about your transition, especially. Like most state governments have a very heavy, PMBOK or CMMI, let's say, waterfall approach to managing and running projects. But those of you that have moved to more agile things, kind of curious how that transition occurred.
Well, it was out of necessity. So the transformation, it wasn't like a bunch of us started hearing about Agile and we said, hey, let's do this cool new thing everybody's talking about on the forums, right? The waterfall SDLC, which was heavily embedded in our state government, had become a bit problematic for us. So for all the same reasons that many other organizations experience in waterfall is the ability to be agile and to make modifications and build applications in a swift and effective way is what is required in state government today, in my opinion. Right. Waterfall, you developed all the requirements a year ago or 2 years ago, and they become so stale that they become irrelevant by the time that you deploy the application.
Right.
So those of us who have been in software development a while know that there's a CCB and a change board, and all these changes start coming in, and it's a great process. But what happens is it comes in late in the game.
Right.
So a lot of the new people that replace the people who wrote the requirements, they're coming in and saying, hey, that's not how we want to do this application. That's not really what we wanted. Right. I know they wanted it, but they're not here anymore, and this is what I want.
Right.
So
now that I see it, that's not what I really want. Right?
Yeah, and so when you're doing your final demos right before waterfall, everybody's a bit surprised. The application team saying, well, this is what you said you wanted 2 years ago, and they're saying, well, it's not what I want now, right?
Right.
And so I think the biggest problem is it negates all of the good testing that was done in waterfall, where you went through an SDLC, and then at the last minute you're dropping in a lot of code and you're breaking things that you had developed and tested prior to that. So we were going into production with escape defects, which are defects our users find out about. Right, yeah. And it was a lot. It wasn't a little, right? And so we decided that was our biggest issue, is we weren't able to deploy things quickly in a quality manner. That was essentially what drove us to it.
So walk me through the mechanics of how you made the change. Was it a incremental and iterative change, or did one day you wake up and say, we have to start being agile? How did you make it happen?
Well, I had some pretty significant experience with agile organizations from a development perspective. So I knew that it could work. I didn't know how difficult it would be in a state organization, yeah. But I knew that it could work on a very large scale because I had successfully worked with teams that had done that. And so I had a different perspective than everybody else. So I knew, I saw the vision and the overall strategy, before I ever started. And so that type of insight allowed me to be able to go and socialize this new movement or this adoption of Agile to everyone else. It was very difficult for people that were very set in their ways with waterfall. Even with developers, we had some leave when we went to Agile because it was just too much work too fast. In the old days, they could spend about 2 months developing per year. Right. And that went away. So it was really difficult for people to change that had just had this mindset, and all the processes were geared towards waterfall. So, my mantra, the only thing that had to change was everything, and almost everything did change.
So where did you start? Where was what's the starting point for people that are just jumping into this?
I built an Agile, first of all, I spent some time really understanding how the waterfall processes worked, because I knew I would have to, alter, augment, or lean all of those. So my first few months was just in discovery of the organization and going and meeting with people and really finding out how they did stuff. I don't like to jump in and make a bunch of changes if I don't understand how it's working now.
Sure, yeah.
And so that's the first thing I did. The next thing I did is I put together an agile process guide and a strategy guide.
Oh, nice.
So I built a business plan, just as you would if you were, building a perspective for a new startup. I built a plan that really showed us how to get from A to Z and what all would be required. I did dedicate an agile readiness team of about 4 people. That was their role for 17 months, was all the different agile readiness components.
So they were like sort of agile coaches then? They worked with other teams?
They weren't really coaches. They were very good at rolling out new products and strategies to organizations.
Oh, okay.
Right. So they weren't agile experts. They became agile experts through the process, right? But they were very good at communication plans. They were very good at training. We made well over 30 videos, professional videos.
Wow.
For agile fundamentals, for some of our agile tools, also on how to do risk management, how to do a lot of these different things. So when a new employee comes in now, they part of their orientation is watching all these videos before they're ever added to a Scrum team. So we trained probably about 800 people. Half of them were on the business side and procurement and contracting, and the other half were in applications.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to ask you about getting started. Is that it seems like with state government, getting the business side to buy in is harder. How did you deal with that?
Well, we had some really innovative people on the business side. It was just a pleasure working with people that knew what they wanted. They were very specific about what the outcomes should be. And they knew that we, from an IT perspective, really weren't meeting those expectations, to nobody's fault. I mean, it was really just a process problem. They were on board quicker than anyone. The executives on the business side were hugely supportive because they believed in the strategy and they believed in the vision. So they were easier than on the IT side, right?
So were they willing participants as product owners and as business strategists here?
The executives were in the beginning, right? So the executives knew that this was a significant change throughout the organization. So once they bought in, and you've heard me say unequivocal leadership buy-in, once they bought in, then everyone else started to buy in reluctantly, right?
Yeah, right.
But they couldn't sabotage it or circumvent the effort because we had complete organizational top-down, I don't like that term, but we had executive sponsorship from day one because they believed that it was good.
Yeah, that's one of the common misperceptions we hear a lot is that, that self-organization and Agile don't really require top-down leadership. And I think it really does, but it's a question of what does that leadership look like?
Yeah, I think it's imperative. I see a lot of organizations where they'll have some agile teams and development, but they never took the time to get the executive support, and typically ends up with many departments not joining in and changing their processes and being part of the solution. And so if you don't have that, I think you can do a few teams with a couple of customers, but I don't think you can go to a 100% agile model with hundreds of developers and testers, and then hundreds of business partners that help you with the requirements and the user story development. I think it's absolutely impossible not to have top-down support for large-scale agile.
How did you rope the suppliers, the external companies into this?
Well, as you know, the state uses a lot of vendor participation, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it was my experience that they were just as frustrated with waterfall as everybody else was.
Yeah.
So they weren't getting the outcomes they wanted. They wanted to be able to go tell a good story. So once we gave them that path towards being able to tell a good story, then they came on board quickly. The vendor participation, once we had a strategy, a vision, a process guide, and the model, they adopted it rather quickly. We did have to augment contracts that were very waterfall.
Yeah.
And we worked with the vendors' legal teams and our legal teams to understand what that looked like. But That's a huge component of agile readiness at scale is amending contracts and making sure that your vendors can fall into the strategy. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because that's the reason we started Agile CXO, is because we were working with another state and we noted that their contracts were a real impediment to them adopting Agile, and we started working with them on that. So we think that's pivotal, almost central to making it work in a state organization is having vendors on board. But the struggle we found with a couple of the states we were working with was the trust issue.
Yeah.
They had built a culture of low trust, right? With their suppliers, pay by deliverable, pay by milestone, where Agile doesn't really support that. So that's always the question is how do you maintain and support Agile values while working in a contractor environment?
Well, 90% of Agile to me is a culture and mindset shift, especially a transformation to Agile. So I think one of the things that I did was we didn't create this separation and delineation between who was a contractor, who was a vendor, who was a state employee, right? So we were all one. You have to break down those silos between these different departments. And when I first saw it, you couldn't even talk. You couldn't even go, to the other part of the building and talk to someone unless you talk to your manager and they talk to their manager and then they talk to their supervisor and then finally the two people would get to talk, typically very filtered, right? Yeah. So I made it a rule in Agile that anyone could go talk to anyone if they had a problem to solve in the entire organization. And if any manager has had a problem with that, they could certainly come visit with me about it. So there were the opportunity to get everybody to buy in meant that everybody was able to talk to everyone in a very transparent and trustful manner.
Nice.
That's essential, because if you don't set that foundation, you're always going to have these silos and these walls between these different departments that need to work, seamlessly together to deliver a great product.
Right. So how did you deal with roles? So a traditional environment, of course, has many different defined roles and responsibilities, and Agile teams tend to talk about, a minimal set of roles. So different roles within a team, for instance, database architect, tester.
Yeah.
For the traditional Scrum team, you don't have a project manager, you don't have those roles defined. A lot of states have maintained those roles, even though they've been moving more towards Agile. How did you guys deal with that?
Well, the roles are part of your strategy. So you really have to define all of those roles up front, and then you've got to transition folks to those roles, or you need to hire to it. So I think where states struggle a lot, and even maybe in the private sector a lot, is you've got these people that are these team leads or these architects that have been driving all activity in the organization for a long time, and then all of a sudden you come along and you dismantle all that and you say, look, I want these self-governing, self-organizing teams, and there are no bosses. Right? Right. So it creates a lot of fear in the organization. So here's my recommendation: is create a team, and within that team have the people that are there to add the value and do the work. So when you go and you contract, let's say you contract a vendor, it's not a big deliverable-based contract where you say, build this application and in 2 years, I want you to deliver these components at this time. You have to take the mindset that you're going to buy teams. You're going to buy teams. You're going to have these specific roles in these teams, and you're going to know 2 weeks before what the deliverables are. You're really not going to know a year ahead of time. Right. So therefore, all of your RFPs have to change, right? Because this whole new model takes place. So we have usually 2 or 3 developers in a team. We have a subject matter expert, which knows the technical architecture really well. They work across multiple teams. We adopted Agile certified practitioners. Each of those ACP, they support 4 teams each. So they're removing blocking issues that the team has. And I created a new role that's not known in the industry or used. I created a role called an Agile Integrator.
Oh, okay. And
the Agile Integrator, the AI, they make sure that the work is seamless across all teams. So they were typically, before they were business analysts, right? Or they knew the requirements really well. They knew the systems. And so they become a core team member as an Agile integrator. And that person is also typically a state person because you've got to go across multiple teams to include vendors and other application teams. So there needs to be conduit between those teams. And the Agile integrator was a role that I created that created that conduit between all the teams and really making sure that you could deploy things and the timing of things was all worked out. So I think you have to look at it from the context of what do you need to support a team, and you will have a PMO that supports those teams,
Sure.
But the team has to be looked at as the resources that you put in it. Understand that the deliverables are going to come about 2 weeks before that team engages, but then it's up to the state to monitor and manage with cumulative flow diagrams and burn down charts and all those other things and risk to make sure that you get the outcome that you want and the demo and the review is successful, right? So I think it's a whole different paradigm shift away from traditional waterfall, PMI, project manager type contracts.
Yeah, we one of our clients, Nationwide Insurance, they call this bringing the work to the team, not bringing the team to the work.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so they
really like that a lot.
They engage a team, and then every 2 weeks they give them work, and the team doesn't have to worry about looking down the road too much, more than a couple of sprints, and they can really maintain their focus. And the cool thing about that is they're leaving teams intact basically forever.
Yeah.
And then some of them are working on different apps, and they move applications through it. So it's just kind of a cool idea. It sounds like
I really like that. Can I use that?
Yeah, I don't think it's
bring the work to the team, not the team to the work, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I thought it was brilliant, really.
I love that. I think it really encapsulates in one small sentence what I just described, right?
Yeah, and they've really mastered Agile at scale. I think they've got 255 Scrum teams.
Yeah.
And they're all working together in one way or another. So it sounds like a little bit like what you're doing over there. So we don't have a lot of time left, but I wanted to get into tools just a tiny bit. And I'm not a person that thinks tools solve problems, but we are seeing tools play a large role in a lot of large scale implementation. So can you just talk a little bit about some of your standard tools that you're using?
Yes. We're using Jira primarily for task management, for user story discovery and requirements gathering for distilling the epics into user stories and the acceptance criteria. We're using a tool called JAMA.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
What JAMA does that's very different from, and I'm not here to promote products, but I did a lot of exploration on this, as you can well imagine, if you're gonna have a job like mine, is you can individualize the acceptance criteria. So you can click on a button in a user story and you've got a whole new independent acceptance criteria that you can attach documents to, artifacts to, and you can test cases. The list goes on. So to me, an acceptance criteria within a user story is a requirement.
Sure. Yeah.
It essentially is, and that one single requirement requires a lot of focus before it can go into production. So I had to find a tool that could individualize acceptance criteria versus where we were doing it in Jira, where all the acceptance criteria was just in one single text box.
Right.
And if you look at some other tools out there, same thing. They don't focus on this acceptance criteria being a specific requirement that requires a lot of artifacts associated with it and a lot of your activity associated with it. So that's why JAMA worked really well for us. Then we looked at the ability to have some type of a dashboard. So I had to build one. I built a dashboard using Click as an analytics engine that pulls data from different tools, so we can have a dashboard each day to see what the progress of the sprints are, where they're at, what stage they are in the development evolution. So building the dashboard. Then what TaskTop did is it allowed us to bring all these different applications. They've got a lot of APIs, and there's more companies out there that do it, but they've got a lot of APIs that let tools like PPM, Remedy, Jira, JAMA, all of these integrate with one another without going to a huge expense of building interfaces between them, right? Mm-hmm. So So primarily that's what it is, a dashboard, Jira, Jama, and then the integration with other tools.
Wow, great. Yeah, I'd love to hear you tell your story at our next conference. We're all booked up for this year, but on May 3rd, we're having an Agile Leadership Camp Day in DC.
Yeah, I saw that. That looks fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun day. And, we have our keynotes this year, but I'd love to have you out next year to talk to the group about, some of the stuff you've done.
Yeah, it's really unique in state government specifically. And your conference is geared more towards private business and state and government and DoD, correct? So it's across the board.
Yeah, state and federal primarily, and there'll be some commercial there too.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of DoD applications, so I figured if I can get the Army to change things, I could probably get the state to change some stuff. But
yeah, one of our speakers is actually former CIO of Security and Exchange Commission and Department of Education, so he's going to talk about his experience there. And one of the other guys, Greg Pfister, kind of was at least known around DC as the original person who brought Agile to the federal government, and he worked over at the VA. Going back 8 or 10 years. So
that's right.
Back then it was just unheard of to be doing Agile in the federal government, and he's done quite a bit of cool work there. So Greg's going to be our other keynote, and it's going to be a great day. Primarily federal and state government people and some private, but maybe next year we can get you on the list to be one of our speakers.
That'd be great. I think the thing that I'd like to leave most people with when transforming to Agile, even on a small or large scale, is the reason for doing it. I mean, we did it, and I've always done it because of quality, right? I want the quality of the product to be right, and it's what the customers and our citizens of Texas want. I used to build applications for soldiers, so it was in my heart that those applications worked really well, right? Especially during times of Afghanistan and Iraq. Yeah. And so I typically work in organizations that have a mission. Here we have people that are in sometimes desperate need of social services programs and assistance, and we build the applications that provide the eligibility for that. So quality is paramount, right? We can't have broken applications and systems that have defects if we're trying to fulfill this really great mission. So I think it all starts with the mission, and then it moves into a quality discussion. Right. Fast, yeah, you can do it fast, and yes, but that's not the primary reason that I think most people should go into this. Is what kind of product are you building, and is it what your customers or citizens need? Right.
Great. Well, that's great advice. We really appreciate you being on the video cast and spending time with us. So, Cliff Luckey, director, Agile leader, and musician. Great to chat with you, and I will definitely be in touch with some of that information we talked about earlier.
Great. It was great chatting with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah.